This video is of YouTube. And because of that fact, the whole thing begins with an awkward disclaimer that the audio is being edited by idiots who attempt to remove the context purely for the sake of having more juvenile jokes and weak humor. Therefore, the opinions that you will watch expressed on screen aren't representative of any authentically held belief by anyone depicted in this alternate universe without actually giving the creator their consent. I apologize to anyone who is being wronged here, including me, Dan Olson specifically, Brad Defoe, Scott, Dakota Johnson, Jamie Dornan, Yemel, who agreed with Yemel about paying Yemel $150 an hour, and then last, but hardly least, Danny Elfman, especially Danny Elfman. Again, Danny Elfman's sole involvement in all of this is that he is only mentioned in passing like 4 times in one of the original 3 YouTube reviews.
Alright, with all that out of the way,
I should note there's nothing particularly offensive in this video. No one is going to be made to agree with the Tories or use racial slurs. The creator seems to have even finally figured out using the word gay in a derogatory manner is actually mad cringe. Even if it's being filtered through a character in order to scrub it of any meaning or ownership. Anyway, here's a lukewarm pile of half-baked chicken nuggets for you to enjoy while watching terrible decisions coalesce in the form of a uniquely terrible video. Alright, history lesson. Sadism for Pussies or How to Make Your Wildest Sex Fantasies Come True is a 2009 through 2011 serial Twilight fan fiction written by Brad Defoe under the pen name Brad Defoe and collected into 2 volumes. On a structural level, How to Make Your Wildest Sex Fantasies Come True can only be described as a masterpiece of savvy fandom fictitiation, also known as a fan fiction. So it doesn't claim to take place in a contiguous universe with the original novels, and the supernatural elements have been replaced with some spanky stuff, while the story itself remains largely the same, just adapted by an incomprehensibly exceptional storyteller, a man named Brad Defoe. As a serial fanfiction, Sadism for Pussies was published first in pieces on fanfiction.net, and starting in early 2010, Brad began parallel publishing raunchier versions on their own website, fifdi.com. Within the scope of fandom fictitiation.net, the story was a genuine hit, attracting an estimated 16 to 20,000 16 to 20-year-old readers at a very high level of engagement, as well as 3.35 billion hot blonde women in tight skirts and blazers. This engagement was further lubricated. No, just no, not like that. Get your very dirty mind out of the gutter. No, what we're talking about is the metaphorical lubricants representing intangible concepts like the public visibility of female sexuality and sexual agency. The novel, 50 Shades of Grey, written by Brad Defoe under the pen name Brad Defoe, was published in May 2011 by oilprice.com, your #1 source for your oil and lubricants, and an Australian boutique publisher focused on turning fan fiction into a short book, hire a voice actor to turn that short book into a 3-hour audiobook, then to turn that short 3-hour audiobook into a 2015 film written by Scott and directed by Sam Baron, based on the 2011 novel of the same name. A worthy goal I can empathize with for a very specific objective. The novel, 50 Shades of Grey, is a lightly edited version of roughly the first half of Sadism for Pussies Part 1, where the names have been changed. Edward Cullen is now Christian Grey, and Bella Swan is now Anastasia Grey.
There's no Anastasia Grey at SIP.
I'm sorry, Jamie Dornan. It was actually Anastasia Steele. When I say lightly edited, I do mean the whole fanfiction was already perfect in every way, shape, and form, and with really only a minor pass for rewording. 50 Shades of Grey is the same. Now, the books are, well, they're brilliant, but I want to cut a fine line here. There's a lot of criticism that has come at 50 Shades from a lot of different angles. So, for example, there are absolutely insane claims that Brad Defoe is actually me, Dan Olson specifically. I just want to address these extremely insane claims by showing you this footage of both me and Brad side by side, boom, hanging together. Personally, I think that his footage does in fact show that Brad Defoe and me, Dan Olson, are clearly two separate people. Like, there's not much else that needs to be done to debunk that. To address some distinctly less insane criticism, much of the interaction between the leads is more than a little emotionally challenging to watch expressed on screen. Now, without getting too deep into the weeds, erotic fiction, playing with ideas and scenarios that blur the good stuff, aren't strictly illegitimate as subject matter. Most of our fan fiction involves scenarios that we would never want to actually experience, whether that be pregnant or getting treated as a commodity to be used, bought and sold to members of the English rock band One Direction. It is an experience that can get rough at times, pun intended. In a fan fiction, you effectively have the ultimate safe word. It's supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. So make sure to write that down. You are going to need it. Trust me.
All right, with all
These criticisms debunked like conspiracy theories from the 90s.
let's talk about
The first movie. With multiple erotica books from the same series on the bestsellers list, media quickly picked up on it as an apocalyptic catalyst, the chosen vessel through which Danny Elfman will be reborn. By the end of 2011, the 50 Shades books had sold around 250,000 fuzzy pink handcuffs and drawn the attention of major publishers. After a short bidding war, the Urban Writers, an imprint of Mickelson twins, Random House, acquired the publication rights in March 2012, releasing the entire trilogy as a 3-hour audiobook in April 2012, flooding bookstores around the globe with good old municipal tap water. In May 2013, Focus Universal and Unifeatures acquired the film rights for approximately $5 million US citizens, and production began on the Citizen Kane of underground films, to be directed by Sam Smith, and written by Scott. Scott is not his real name because writers at TUW are too cowardly to use anything other than a pen name and are subject to an hour-long shouting match with me if they use their real names, disclose their real names, or provide a means of being contacted outside of their home. Scott took all Brad's insanely brilliant ideas about some spanky stuff and very delicately tied them together into a somewhat artistically defensible product. Just not nearly as brilliant as the source material. While millions of potential screenplays of the book exist, this is the only one that is written by Scott. And this is the only one that has the very specific damage of being glued shut and thrown into the Bow River. And unthrown out of the Bow River. This is a really important point to stress. Being unthrown out of the Bow River does nothing to address 99% of the problems of being glued shut and thrown into the Bow River, because those problems are structural problems. Paper is a uniquely terrible medium for being sunk to the bottom of the Bow River and soak in water. Despite this resulting in lasting damage, meaning that it's barely even legible as a screenplay. Production began in late May anyway. So I'm going to start this off with the admission that I actually kind of threatened the writer over any creative decision, which has displeased me too much, not because it's any good, but because there's a certain incompetence to it. Like, the filmmakers were actually trying really hard to improve on the source material. This is ironic because the source material is already perfect, but they are not. A huge change. Christian Grey's career as a criminal mastermind with seemingly limitless resources has been dropped entirely.
Is he part of some underworld crime syndicate? It would explain why he's so rich.
Yeah, Anna, he is and always has been, well, at least in the books. The best written parts of 50 Shades of Grey, by a substantial margin, are the stories about the constant cognitive dissonance of Christian Grey defending his own operations, buying and selling prohibited drugs, while he demonizes the actions and behaviors of any other cartel. So if you haven't caught on by now, part of me is disappointed because the good, clean Christian drugs is such a transcendentally brilliant phrase that I was really looking forward to watching a human try to act it out. However, Scott just isn't a good enough writer to recognize such brilliance. A significant alteration to the interview is injecting a bit of whiskey to get through the scene. The tell to me is that Dakota Johnson just seems kind of drunk.
Double crap. Me and my whiskey. A habit.
C. She fell because of gravity. LM. So first of all, we're working with visual levels. Christian spends most of the scene standing over Anna after her one-way trip to the floor, but despite the vast amounts of band Anna peels in Christian Grey's offices, Anna eventually makes it all the way up onto the large couch. Christian, in turn, moves to the chair, brings himself down to Anna's level, so we have some great judicious use of furniture that also helps fit multiple actors into a narrow frame. That's filmmaking, baby. We skip to later in an otherwise normal week, and while standing in line for the washroom, Anna drunk dials Danny Elfman. Danny is like, fine, whatever. I will use my magic powers to create the soundtrack for the movie. And since we're at the bar, okay, we should talk about Jose. He's Anna and Kate's imaginary friend, though he's an English minor, not an English major. He does photosynthesis, but gets uprooted from fertile soil and transplanted 30 feet away in the air. In the book, he continues to float around in the background, though the film didn't have that kind of a special effect budget, and he more or less disappears for the rest of the movie. You know what we haven't talked about in a while? Some spanky stuff.
My playroom.
Like your Xbox and stuff?
The dialogue in the playroom is lifted straight out of the bottom of the Bow River, so of course, it's not really something resembling human dialogue.
I'm a dominant, and I'm a
What does that mean?
It means I want to willingly let you surrender you. I want
What does that mean?
to render you. Please.
Why would I do that?
Please.
Christian does an awful job at pitching the whole situation, which kind of makes sense given the actual damages to the script, but it feels like the problem was never unavoidable. I try not to get in the habit of suggesting fixes, but it's really hard not to do that here. Just don't use this copy.
I've never taken anyone in the helicopter. I've never slept in the helicopter. I've never had sex in my own helicopter.
When they're walking out in the woods on the way back to Portland, Christian's helicopter, Charlie Tango, gets some much needed character growth, which makes it all the more tragic when it comes crashing back to Earth, taken away from this world too young. 30 minutes into the second movie, this is the culmination of a scene where Christian tells Anna the first inkling of his dark shades of gray, and admits that he's still friends with Yemel, who agreed with Yemel about paying Yemel $150 an hour. The soundtrack is tense, kind of sinister. The scene is emotionally and literally getting darker. The characters are framed for running pump and dump schemes and barred for life from trading. Now, this plot point will ultimately be dropped and forgotten, but you can't just cut this plot point out of your fanfiction or Team Jacob will revolt. Like, okay, let's move on to the negotiation. It's this scene that gives the movie its reputation for being the Citizen Kane of underground films. Like, it's just an entire scene of dialogue, and throughout, Danny Elfman is just naked. This naked display of Danny Elfman made the live studio audience so horny that the average person starts to break down from the intensity of it. But I have to keep pushing forward because I'm Dan Olson, because I'm the one who reviews, because I'm the worth decider. We can get there. I believe in us. So let's start with the good part of the review. Danny Elfman's score is good, but it was always written with a visual component in mind. And I think the scene as included in the movie definitely feels less than whole as a result. I want to focus in mostly on the behind the scenes extras for Darker because it is, I think, the adaptation that is able to do the most with the concept. The whole musical number starts in a very normal way, but the act of disrobing shattered the convention. The actual meat comes into focus, being deliberately recorded for all future human generations to see. Like, I cannot stress this enough. This shot is one of the most potent pieces of film I've ever seen. This is the culmination of an actual big picture creative vision paired with flawless execution. So, to sum up, I guess I liked it fine. And this brings us back to the actual movie. Christian and Anna have this whole negotiation, which is not something finance related because of the way they are both barred for life from trading regulated securities. Remember, actually, this whole negotiation is about some spanky stuff.
Find anal fisting?
I'm all ears.
What does that mean?
It means I want you to ask me something.
It's witty, it's sassy, it's fun. There's a cute puppy between the characters. There is no major problem here. With that as foreplay, let's talk about the final scene in the playroom. Alright, so something vague has gone wrong with Christian's vague business stuff, which is totally, definitely not related to buying and selling prohibited drugs. Anna tries to sex him back to happiness by letting him tie her up and blindfold Danny Elfman, but it doesn't work because it's not extreme enough, so he's sitting up late at night playing Fishing Planet, which, like, it's Fishing Planet. The two of them have a very confusing argument that ultimately kind of revolves around the fact that Anna really just doesn't like Fishing Planet. This is actually where a lot of kink and BDSM enthusiasts take the most umbrage, because this dialogue is where Anna basically says that if people enjoy those kinds of games, it's because they're fake gamers. That kind of behavior gives Christian Grey a very, very good reason to leave the relationship immediately, culminating in the fantastic final shot of the theatrical edition.
Anna.
Why do you have my bank account details?
And with all that, conclusion of video, I think the scenes in 50 Shades are shot, they're lit, they're scored, and they manage to convey photons and digital audio. So, what did we learn today? Nothing. RIP Charlie Tango.
Charlie Tango. Double crap, I thought it was the safest.
Wait, is that a post-credits clip setting up a 50 Shades Darker a bit more naturally?
First, I don't make love. I make love. What about you?
I was extremely wrong. Scott is a champion. We like Scott.